Welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul-led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. Hi, and thank you so much for joining me. Today, instead of looking down at the ground like so many of us dog owners are used to doing, we're going to take a look up towards the sky. I'm joined by my guest today, Suzanne Gerber, who is a classically trained astrological counselor, shamanic energy healer, and animal lover who draws on her training and initiations in shamanism, Reiki, Buddhism, quantum physics, and soul-centered psychotherapy to support people in waking up to their purpose and manifesting their dream life. This is a fascinating episode. Suzanne shares with us how we can use tools like astrology to better understand ourselves and to create better relationships with our pets and others. She reminds us that we and our beloved pets are intimately connected to the cosmos because we're made of stardust too. We touch on topics like free will versus fate. Hint, despite popular lore, the planets don't cause things to happen to you. How your natal chart is your psychic MRI scan, and some really useful places to start if you want to explore astrology as a tool for self-inquiry. You're gonna love this. And Suzanne also really kindly offers listeners a powerful gratitude recording that you can use in your own personal practice. And just as a reminder before we get started, this episode is sponsored by Aspirationary, which in full transparency is another project of mine where we create books, notebooks, and stationery to support you in becoming all you aspire to be. I'm really excited to announce that we've released a Spanish language version of our popular My First Period tracker for young girls and tweens in order to increase menstrual literacy and empower young people to become advocates for their menstrual health. You can learn more about our books on our Instagram, which is Aspirationary, and that's spelled ASPIRATIONERY. Okay, on that note, let's go. Hi, Suzanne. Thank you so much for joining me on the Mystic Dog Mama podcast today. I am really excited for our conversation all about astrology.
Well, astrology and animals, right?
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. There's always animals involved in Mystic Dog Mama. That goes without saying. Oh, but I'm so thrilled that we're going to be having this chat because you and I chatted a few weeks ago and it was like, so amazing. I feel like I found a soul sister. I feel like there are so many interesting things going on. And I actually feel like this is a conversation that's not only going to be really interesting to people, but also really helpful for how they can use tools like astrology to better understand themselves and to create better relationships with others and with their animals. So I'm really thrilled to dive into this.
Well, me too. So, yeah, um, two of my favorite subjects for absolute sure.
Well, can you start by telling us a little bit about how you even got into astrology? What was that path like for you?
Oh, we got to go to past lives to really find the source of that. My love of the planets and the night sky and making connections. It's just always been there. Some people have these like dramatic turning points in their life. I don't have that. I've just
Mhm.
always, since I was a little child, been fascinated with the night sky in particular. And I think a lot of people love the moon and the sky. And these days a lot of people have like sky map apps, and we love it for so many reasons, and some of the reasons are we could probably describe. It's so cool, it's so dark, the moon's so bright, and other times it could be something that isn't even known to us, like a connection to star systems or the energies of them, if your mind isn't ready to take that leap. That maybe we're made of stardust. We're made of the same things the planets are made of. I mean, literally on a science level. So of course they're going to be in us. We're going to be in them. Um, Here's the thing where people can stumble with astrology. They think that the planets are causing things on Earth, and that's not the nature of the relationship. It's an associative. It's a correlation. It's the synchronicity theory that things that happen in a given time have characteristics of a given time. And it took me a while, in the beginning, like so many new astrologers, especially in the pre-internet days, because it's a whole different, dare I say, animal today. Um, Now everybody has access to it, but back in when I was first getting into this, it was really hard to find books. It was really hard to find teachers. It was hard to find um, understandable information, because a lot of the people who had been writing about it in the early 20th century and previous centuries, it was a different style of writing. It wasn't very colloquial. It wasn't really accessible. Often it was translated from other languages, whether German or Latin or Greek. Now it's very, very different, very accessible, but people are really also getting into the depth of it, which is where I like to go. And what you said at the beginning, excuse me, Alexa, is we use it. It's not just entertaining. It's really a helpful tool. I think of it as the best diagnostic tool. I think we all love psychic readings and tarot and I Ching and all kinds of divination. And I'm no different. But what I love about astrology, it's kind of geeky, right? You can look at planets, you can look at degrees, you can look at timing, and we can see things with a lot more precision. Even the best psychics will say, well, I'm feeling it and I'm getting the number 4, but I don't know if that's 4 days, 4 weeks, or 4 years. With astrology, we don't have that kind of confusion. So I would say wherever I was in my personal evolution, astrology called me in on a deeper, ever deeper level. And today I work with it. Yeah, of course, people want to know about love, right? Who doesn't? Even if people come with something very specific, they'll be, oh, well, look, we have 10 minutes left. Let's talk about my love life. It's just going to come up, right? And our what we do in the world, and how we make money and how we stay secure and health, sure. But most people that I work with these days are interested in really 2 big themes: their soul's intention for this lifetime, and how to heal core wounds that might have their roots, just like the way I feel about me in astrology, have their roots in a different life, and or that come through the ancestral line, that come through our lineage. And how no coincidence, right? Whatever, let's call them woundings, we experience as children, well, people will say, well, I understand it because my mother had the same experience and her mother. And it's not a coincidence. And people are really collectively waking up to this. So astrology, as humans evolve, astrology and what it's useful for evolves.
Oh, I love that so much. There's just so much wisdom and depth in what you just shared, and I think it's really beautiful here to hear, because it goes beyond the typical way of like how we used to just read our horoscope in like the paper or whatever, that kind of a thing. But actually, I love that more and more people are coming to you and asking you these bigger questions, because I think it also speaks to the general paradigm shift that I feel like we're in collectively, where we're really being asked to take that deeper dive, to integrate the shadow self, to really look at why are we here, and can we choose. I think the big question is ultimately, can we choose love over fear at kind of every level of our lives, whether that's sort of the small little decisions that we need to make, and as well as the really big ones of how do we see ourselves as a species. So that's beautiful that people are coming to you with more of that kind of thing. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, since you mentioned that the planets aren't causing things to happen to us, that it is an associative kind of relationship. Could you explain a little bit more about that? Because I think sometimes people are kind of confused about the sort of free will versus fate kind of conversation, and get a little bit worried about, like, is this happen, is something causing this to happen to me, and do I have any power over that? And I think you have an interesting take on that, so I'd love to hear from you about that.
Let me start with a spoiler. There's nothing to be afraid of. And even things that we think of as, let's just say, bad, aren't. Because if you pull back far enough from the situation, and I always use the image of, if you go to a museum or an art gallery, and there's this giant oil painting, right? Like takes up half the wall. And people are standing up really close to it. What do you see? You see globs of paint. You don't really see a picture, right? You've got to step back, meaning you've got to gain perspective on a situation. And that's an important thing with our lives. You know, we get fired from a job, or we don't get a job, or a relationship ends, or, you know, something happens health-wise to us. And we just think right away, what do we think? This is bad. This is a problem. I need to fix this. Something's wrong with me, perhaps. But so many times, like anybody who's older than maybe 12 that's listening here will be nodding their heads. It's like that thing that happened that was so momentous and so crushing when you were 18. You're like, thank God I didn't marry that person. Or that dead-end job that at age 29, when your Saturn's returning, you get unceremoniously fired from, and your ego is crushed and you're humiliated and you can't call your parents, or, you know, you just feel like my life is over. And then 2 years later, you've repositioned yourself on a totally different track, going in the right direction, just thinking, what would have happened if I'd stayed on that other train? So right away, even if you think it's bad, step back, or just, you know, like we say here where I live in Florida, if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. It's going to change, right? Life is going to change. So what do I mean by planets don't cause things? So another example, and I think people learn by analogy, right? Because things that we already know and we already agree on, it's easier to start there than to try to give you some obscure, you know, maybe deep philosophical treatise. That's not interesting to anybody. So I call your astrology chart a psychic MRI. And I don't mean psychic like crystal balls and, oh, you know, there's a tall, dark stranger coming in. I mean the psyche, the realm of the psyche. Now you can get an MRI and they could tell you everything that's going on in your shoulder, but how do you get an MRI of your mind? I'm not going to say brain, because there are ways that we can, you know, run scans on the brain, but of the mind. This is not a visible phenomenon. So the chart is as close as we come. Now, anybody who's ever looked at an X-ray, even like your dental X-rays, you look at it and you can see, oh, I've got gaps, or I've got, you know, this is too far away from that, or, you know, whatever it is that we see in a scan. Now, did that scan cause that pain in your knee, that pain in your molar? You know, nobody would ever think that, would they? But we understand that it's a reflection of it. It's a way to get a picture of something that we really wouldn't be able to see otherwise. And so that's what looking at our astrology charts is like. And what is an astrology chart? In the 21st century, we say it's a screenshot of the sky at the exact minute that you were born. And this is why it is important to try to get our time of birth, because that is going to move where those planets fall in the chart. And that's very significant. We could still work with it if you don't have the time, but it's really a wonderful. So this could be sending people right now scrambling to their, you know, their baby scrapbook to try to find that birth certificate. And it is a worthwhile pursuit. But Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst who kind of updated Freud, a contemporary of Freud, but really far more spiritual, and himself a real believer, which seems like a silly word, like I believe in gravity, but right, because it doesn't matter what you believe, it happens. But Jung really understood astrology and interwove that along with a lot of ideas of the way the conscious and the unconscious minds work, which is not to imply they're two separate entities. It's just kind of a gradient, right? But he understood that a moment in time is imbued with qualities. Now, this is pretty metaphysical. I mean, it's hard to, you know, analyze them the way we might look at something on a microscope and see what the components are, but he understood this energetically. And so where the plant, like the lines of your hands, how on earth? I mean, how crazy is that? And yet people like my sister will take your hand in hers and tell you stories about yourself that are going to leave your jaw on the floor, because we live in a holographic universe. We live in a fractal universe, and everything is a piece of everything else. But I'm not you. I mean, we might be soul sisters, but we're not each other. And so some people say, well, why do we even incarnate? I mean, if we're in this state of bliss, because the best explanation I've heard is that we are a manifestation of pure consciousness wanting to experience itself. And so this is a very, I would say, philosophical way of explaining that things from one moment are connected in a certain way. And so the planets, it's not like that's the only way to understand what our essence is. The lines of the hands are. There are people that read the bumps, right? The bumps on the face, the lines on the feet. There are people that can hear our vocal patterns and tell us things about ourselves. These are all wonderful things. But a lot of us are just kind of, it's our attunement, right? And a lot of us are attuned to the planets. And so they're going to reflect things back to us. So we look at the chart, and the big mistake that people who are new to astrology make is that they're going to look at it and they're going to ask their teacher or someone that they're working with and go, what does that mean? What does that mean? And the correct answer can only be, it doesn't mean anything. It implies, it suggests a whole spectrum of possibilities. We're not on the same level of whatever development. We don't want to be judgmental about it, but we're all different. And so, how one person expresses her moon in Pisces, is going to be different from how somebody else does. And how does that moon connect to other planets? And where is it in the chart? And how did your real life experiences, the family you grew up in, the situations that happened to you, your ancestors, what you were taught, what you were shown, how much freedom you received, how much support you received. And then, of course, the opposite of that, what sort of abusive, painful experiences that we had. How does that disrupt what could be a natural unfolding of our gifts? So these are just reflections of us. And if there wasn't room for choice, we would just be stuck with this. It would also imply that however we were as an infant is how we will be as adults. Okay, for some people that may be true. They never actually mature or evolve, but most of us do. That evolution comes from somewhere. It comes from our choices. We always have choices. Even if the only choice is just to say, fine, I'll go along with it, that's still a choice. Karma's bigger than that. We think we have ultimate free will and ultimate choices, but again, like with that painting in the museum, step back far enough and you see that we're making choices within a greater matrix where there are certain things. Now, they're not set up by our enemies. They're not set up by punishing gods, or anything like that. If it's anything, which I believe it is, it's our own higher self that chose certain opportunities, certain possible pathways, certain challenges. A lot of people will call these soul contracts for a lifetime. So here we are acting full of our free will, sometimes completely unaware that there's another part that's still us that set certain things into motion. And when people talk, when they want to talk about their soul's intention, when they want to understand how to heal, what I think we're really talking about is finding a way to weave together the desires of the ego in this lifetime and to try to remember or divine the intentions of the soul.
Oh my God. Yes to all that. Yes. Absolutely. I think that's so helpful, Suzanne, because I think people can often feel trapped Like, am I doomed in a sense? Like, and you know, I don't want to feel like that. I want to feel like I have choice. And I agree with you. I think so much, I am not an expert in astrology by any means, but the little bit that I have kind of explored for myself, and sort of as we go through big collective things, like for example, we're talking about how the US is going through its Pluto return and what that means for a country, and then ultimately when it affects at the collective level, it affects at the individual level too. But what I have found most helpful for myself when I have reflected back on my chart is exactly what you're describing, in that it helps give me a better understanding of how I am showing up in the world and where my skill sets are within that, actually. And there was something, because I feel like astrology and something like human design kind of are in conversation with one another, because if you're not familiar with human design, you also use your birth chart in order to understand what your body graph is. So there is a conversation between these two systems. And what I've just found so helpful is that it's not something that's dictating how I am. It gives me a better lens to understand how I naturally show up in the world, and how can I use that understanding to my advantage to both be more self-compassionate, for example, and to better understand like the way that my energy works and actually work with that, instead of trying to put myself into a different box that I just don't fit in because society says that that's how we're supposed to be, So I definitely don't use it in this like I need to know what's going to happen in my future, but very much in this sense of like, how does it give me a better understanding, a different lens, different language to explore who I already am, in order to, with that aim and that intention of exactly like you're saying, to show more fully up as myself in that conversation between what my ego wants, what I think I want, and actually what my higher self is guiding me to, and how that has created an experience for me. The more I embrace this, there's so much more flow in life. It's not like I'm not fighting things in the same way that I used to. I'm really kind of rallying against what's showing up. And to your point of understanding that anything that's showing up for me in my life is happening for me, not to me. And so my relationship to the thing is very different. I might not like it. Like my preference might be, this isn't so fun, but I understand that there is a bigger context to it. So I love that you're sharing that, because I think that's so helpful. So helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love the way you just like kind of expanded all that. Very, very, very much so. People do feel doomed sometimes. I mean, we live in scary times.
Yeah.
But I think what's really important is just what you're talking about. It's this very subtle shift in consciousness of, instead of thinking I'm fighting the world, I've got to, I'm always doing battle, just our language, right? We use such violent language for
Mm.
our metaphoric speech. Instead of seeing it that way, seeing it as, okay, so if everything is perfect and everything is happening for me and I'm acting with intention, right? Because I don't think we're meant to go through life, kind of passively and just allowing things to happen. You set a course and you give it a go. And if things flow, if things support you, then it's usually, I think it's a good reflection that, okay, this might be a good path. Well, then things could change again. So it's about just staying aware. And what level of awareness? All levels of awareness. Consciously, oh, that's a red light. I should stop. That's not something we vibe out. Right? That's something, these are rules we follow. That's Saturn. Saturn are the rules we all agree to make us all better and take responsibility for our lives. But then there's what feels better. And for a lot of people, what you described about trying to like rigidly put ourselves into a box, we grow up with more shoulds than we even are aware of. And, a lot of people, like maybe in the therapeutic or coaching space, will say, stop shitting on yourself, right? Because what do? We do this. And when we really stop and catch it, we're like, wow, where did that come from? What does that mean to be a good girl, right? Or a gentleman? What does that mean? Often it means playing by somebody else's rule book. There are a number of things in astrology, in modern astrology, which is what I practice. I'm classically trained, but I've just branched into looking at a lot of different planets, dwarf planets, asteroids, mathematically derived points, not because I just want to crowd a chart, but because these things illuminate aspects of a more contemporary, and to me, there's a bias here, more evolved human. Even the people that we would call primitive are still more evolved than, say, barbarians and Huns, right? Because we have consciences, we're aware of them, and we have more agency than people did in prior times. And we know that, and everybody knows what's right and wrong. We don't need, two tablets of stone, and we certainly don't need politicians to tell us what's right and wrong. We all know, and we all know when we transgress it. And the good news is no soul gets away with anything. People might, souls don't, because karma is, nobody's keeping score, but it's just the flow. It's just this law of action reaction. That's all it is. It's like, again, you don't have to believe in gravity, but if you jump off a building, you will fall. And you don't have to believe in karma, but what goes around will come around. But so many people today, people who come to me, people who are interested in their soul's intention, about their deepest healing, part of what is involved is something that you said, okay? Perfect. Understanding our shadow. Even really good people like you and me, we've got our shadow sides, right? I say, in theory, Mother Teresa had a shadow side, right? I mean, everybody has a shadow. Everything has a shadow. And what's the best way to handle a shadow? Hide it, deny it, pretend it doesn't exist. And that's going to make it bigger and stronger and have a bigger effect on you. It's so important to be kind and to not take it like, oh, I messed up. I have a problem. I'm broken. This is really old school thinking. And this is not how contemporary astrology, which is much more bringing in a lot of the ways of sacred femininity, the divine feminine, not the wounds, not what is the legacy of thousands of years of patriarchy. Mm-hmm. And there are beautiful, divine, enlightened males. This really isn't about boy girl. We're talking about larger energetic forces like yin yang forces. And to get out of the toxicity and to get out of all this judgment and criticism and saying something is good and something is bad, what's far more important is to know what's real for you. Know what's real for you. This is going to imply certain shadow things. There are plenty of women who might have grown up, especially of older generations, who feel like they failed because they didn't have a marriage, or they didn't have a marriage that went the distance, whatever that determined distance is supposed to be. I guess if you go with the death do us part thing, who didn't have children or something like that. That's not the mark of a woman. That's a mark of a woman. Those are beautiful things, but it's not the only thing. And that's the gift of feminism, choice. And it could be choice to have 4 kids and stay at home with them. Hardest job in the world. Beautiful. It's sacred work. It's your choice. You maybe a woman wants to sleep around or do what would be called man's work or not work, or allow themselves to let their husband or partner support them. It's all good. It's about owning it and not pushing it away. I'm going back to Carl Jung, a great quote, and I'll probably mangle it. He said, until we make the unconscious conscious, we'll project it outward and call it fate. So people who are afraid that bad things are going to happen to them, what are they really afraid of by that formula? They're afraid of they're not acknowledging in their own minds. And so you said, the more you can be in sync with your true self, the more greater flow you have. And I infer you also have greater joy, greater sense of fulfillment, right? And when we make this unconscious conscious, we might not like what we see, But again, what are we doing here? We're shifting our consciousness to say, this is a part of me. It's part of everyone. What what am I limiting the expression of? How am I holding myself back by not allowing this to be expressed? But then we say, and what's a bridge too far? Right? When do we start to encroach on other people's freedom and happiness? That has to be, we have to agree that that's actually the place to stop. But to express oneself fully, unapologetically, I mean, imagine if everybody did that. I know I'm sounding like my fellow Libra John Lennon here. Imagine what kind of world that would be if people were really living so fully and freely, and as you so beautifully said, to live from a place of love that's guided by love, not of fear.
It would change the world.
Yeah,
It really would,
literally.
but I think that and I'd love to hear your take on it from especially from the kind of greater collective perspective. I do think that we're in that shift right now. I think that you can see that there is more love on the planet despite the tragedies and the atrocities that are going on. For me, it's always like that pendulum that the kind of, if you want to label it light and dark, or I prefer like love and fear. The fear response to so much love is what we are seeing right now. And it's because there is so much love, and we're being asked, I think, at an individual level, and it's reflective of at that collective level, to keep choosing love. How do we be more loving to ourselves, to those around us all the time, and actually bringing animals into the conversation? I think those of us that are drawn to animals, this is part of how we're doing it, because animals are unconditionally loving. They are showing us in a very literal way what it means to be unconditional love, to be so present, to be forgiving, all of those beautiful qualities that we love in them. I think part of why we love it is because we're coming to better understand and own that within ourselves. And I'd love to hear your take on that.
Oh, I love all that. I would say the only possible exception is certain cats. Certain cats can have strings attached to the love.
It's true. I
But
had one of them.
but not dogs. Dogs are unconditional lovers. Absolutely. And it is love. And even like sometimes people really struggle with self-love. They really had their power taken away. They really had a lot of experiences that cause shame in them and they can't get to love. And so when I'm working with someone, I'll say, no problem. Can you accept yourself? Acceptance, I think, is a prerequisite to love. And animals, even the cats, even those finicky Siamese cats or whatever they are, those purebreds, they can accept us. And not only because we feed them, they're in a different, they don't play by the same rules. They don't have time and space, maybe space, but they don't have time. They don't have these limits. That's why death to animals isn't what it is to us. We go to pieces. I mean, we do, it's natural when we lose a dear pet. They're cool. They're like, yeah, okay, next. They're just in their next beautiful energetic space. That's a lesson for us too. And what do they leave us with? I mean, grief, but they leave us with the love. They leave us with that bond that we know. I did an exercise when I have two beautiful cats now, and in the last crew, they usually seem to come in crews. When the last of that crew transitioned over, I worked with this wonderful animal communicator, but so much more. And she guided me through this little exercise to connect with him and put him in my heart, like literally put his energy into my heart. Maybe we did this before he passed, and put it there, and to just practice, practice, practice connecting to it. He's never been gone. Yeah, I mean, for a year and a half until I got the next pets, I missed, you know, those human things. We love holding them. We love when they snuggle with us. We love when they make biscuits on us. Dogs when they, you know, come up with, you know, I'm ready for the walk now. I'm ready to take you on your walk, says the dog. Um, those are the things we miss. But if we can really capture and kind of really encapsulate that loving essence and put it somewhere in our being, we're never going to lose it, and we will always have our lives enriched and enhanced, even when the animal is no longer physically in our realm.
I it I don't believe in coincidence, but I think everything kind of happens for various reasons, and it's so funny that you should just bring that exact example up because literally this morning when I was on the walk with Lucky, he gave up because it was too hot, and I ended up carrying him a big portion of the way. But I love those moments when he lets me do that because he's very independent, and so what outside of those sorts of contexts, he doesn't really like me just picking him up for the sake of picking him up. And I was holding him right next to my heart, and I did exactly what you just described. I
Oh,
imagine pulling him into my chest. I could feel us merging. And I just love it so much when he's like right up there with me. And I consciously was like, pull him into your chest, just pull that energy. And I could feel us just together as like one kind of unit right there. And so it's that thing of, yeah, I agree with you that whether you're doing it because you're imagining it when your pet has passed or they're here now, it doesn't matter. There is no time and space either. Like you are connecting with them, and I think that's just beautiful. That's so beautiful, and I think that's really helpful too for people who are struggling and miss that physical presence in their lives, but they are still here with us. And as you and I both know from doing animal communication stuff, they're very much active in our lives even when they've passed over. Like, they are here. Energy is here. Yeah.
100%. And I don't mean to diminish the pain. I mean, it's
Mm-mm. Mm.
crushing when we lose them. It just is. It's just part of the human experience. My cat, that same one that I just mentioned to you, funny guy. And I sit at my desk. I'm doing readings sessions with people, usually by Zoom, all over the world. And I also write about astrology. And when I do that, I will draw a little chart. And, when I'm writing horoscopes, like what you said, I was going to laugh, when you said, it's not what we read in the paper, or the magazines, or the websites. I wrote those things for 25 years. So, there is a time and a place for it, but those are what I call for entertainment or inspirational purposes only. But I would always have a hand drawn chart at my side, and it was right next to me on my desk. And after that cat, his name was Simon, and after he, I think not when he had already transitioned, but at the very, very end, he wasn't healthy. And I had a couple sessions with this communicator that I worked with who's wonderful. And she's I said, what is he, like through tears and choking, and I could barely, get the words out. And I said, what is he saying? And she said, well, he really has two important messages for you. He really wants you to get another cat when he's gone, because cats ground your energy. You need a cat. I'm like, I don't want another cat. He says, you need another cat.
Simon Says.
Simon says, and I listened. And the second thing that he said is, tell mom to keep making her art. I said, what does he mean? I don't do art. What is he talking about? I think you didn't hear him right. She said, oh no, he said art. He said, those pieces of paper that you keep on your desk that he likes to sit on? It was astrology charts.
I love it. I love it. But it is art, isn't it? Like so much,
Yes.
coming from an art background, this speaks beautifully to how you first described astrology, that art is about asking questions. It's not like design where it's meant to answer them and kind of close
Hmm.
things down. Art is very much about opening up the conversation and having the what ifs. What are the possibilities? What could this look like? So I think that's beautiful that he actually recognized even that essence within what it is that you're doing with astrology.
It blew me away. It was so good.
Oh, that's so lovely. I love it. Suzanne, I wondered if you could talk a little bit too about how we can use astrology in order to better support our relationships with our beloved pets and with other people too. How do you guide people through that? What's a useful way for them to, I guess, in a sense, put it to use, put it to practice?
I think there's a number of ways, and I think it depends on what one's intentions are.
Mhm.
Um, so thinking about it from the animal's point of view, if we happen to know when our pet was, or animal companion, whatever we think of them as, I think of my two little furry friends as my teacher, my tremendous teachers and healers. We don't know when my guys were born because they were rescues, and you and I both really support people rescuing and adopting animals like that, as opposed, and I don't want to say anything controversial here, but as opposed to going a breeder who's going to keep very detailed records of birth times and days and times. Now that's very useful if you do happen to know when your animal companion was born. Well, you could look at their chart. You can understand some of their needs because they're going to have a hard time telling you. They'll show you, right?
Mhm.
Um, if you're sensitive enough to speak their language, because they're not going to say it in English. I mean, occasionally they do, but that's usually in dream time. And even then, you're not sure if you got the right, transmission.
Mhm.
But so being able to look at our pets' charts, and even if we don't know the time, if we know the day, and even if we don't know the day, we could come close and we can get some general ideas. Oh, my cat is going to need to feel safe. They might need their own private space. They might need privacy. Now, a lot of this is true for a lot of animals, right? They need to feel safe. For some dogs, less so with cats, but for some dogs, they need their own little kennel, right? And that has to be their sacred space. We cannot go there. That we can't even pet them in there. They have to be able to be alone in there. And that's just a beautiful lesson for all
Mhm.
of us. We need to honor each other's sacred spaces, whether that's physical space or, you know, the thing we don't talk about, the painful thing we don't talk
Mhm.
about with somebody. Um, that's just honoring boundaries. They might be really spirited and adventurous, or like a little rebellious, right? They might be super high energy and not have a good way to express it. Well, if we can see some of these tendencies in a chart, we can modify their behavior only if it's dangerous. We modify ours, right? If I have a super energetic dog and I love this dog, and I live in a place where there's cold winters and I don't want to have to do that. Either we're going to learn to get better gear so that we made a commitment. It's, to me, it's like any partnership. We made a commitment. I will take care of you and you'll take care of me. So we will learn to deal with the circumstances. If we have some, like, let's say everything is wonderful, but we have some kind of accident and we're on crutches, for a temporary period of time, then we have to find somebody to do that job for us. We have to outsource it because we can't expect the animal to understand. Nope, you're not going to run for 3 months because I can't. So to understand the animal's core needs, just like you would a person you're coming into romantic or any kind of partnership with. What do you need? How can I honor that? How can I support you? So that's one way to look at it. And if you do know the chart, another really super cool thing to do is put the two charts together. In astrology, we call that synastry. What's the connection? Oh, like a friend of mine says, you know, this cat and I, we both have the same Venus. So we both love the same things. I mean, that's fun. We both like to sit on the couch and watch movies, whatever it is. But we might see we have different temperaments. So then what do? It's the same thing. We take on the responsibility. We get bigger and we find ways to accommodate the pet and make them happy. Now, if it's bad behavior, well, quote unquote bad behavior, if it's chewing, our shoes and clawing all our furniture, then we really get to find ways to negotiate. Here's a cute story, and I know you also are an animal communicator yourself, Alexia, but a friend of mine many, many years ago told me that she used to take her dog walking pretty much every day with a good friend of hers and the friend's dog. And my friend's dog was a boy dog, and he was pretty chill. And the friend's dog was a girl dog who was very, very excitable and energetic and, very demonstrative. And just something shifted, and this little girl dog would jump all over my friend's dog and kind of attack him and make him go crazy. And when it was time to go on the walks, the dog just planted his little butt on the floor and was like, no, I don't want to go. No. You could see this like with kids, right? You could imagine being a parent of kids. And so she didn't know what to do because the two adults really enjoyed these daily walks. So she turned to her really, sensitive animal communicator. And she and her dog and the other dog had a conversation. And I said to my friend, wait a minute, you're having psychic doggy therapy? And she said, sort of. But anyway, what came up was the little girl dog was like, I can't help myself. I just love him so much. He's so fun. And every time I see him, I just get so excited and I just want to jump all over him. And okay, thank you. And then asked the boy dog, he goes, well, I like her very much too, but she's just too much. Her energy's too much and she scares me. And I don't know what's going to happen next. And I feel very out of control. And I don't enjoy this. So the communicator said to the little girl dog, did you hear what he said? It's just so hilarious. Do you want to continue to see him? Oh my God, yes, of course, of course, of course. Do you understand that you're going to have to change the way you are around him to enjoy his presence? Yes. Anyway, this went back and forth. And then the very next time they went to walk, my friend was to him, you willing to give her one more chance? Okay. And it changed. And the little girl dog, was on her good behavior. She'd have her little moments, but then she'd bring it back in. And so I'm not sure why that story came up, but it's just another way to work with our animals' natural tendencies. I guess I'm talking about when behavior starts to cross the line.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do about it? This is where astrology, to me, points to other therapeutic means, whether it's dealing with our animals or with ourselves. We see something in our chart. We go, wow, that really is a stuck area for me. That's a trigger. That hurts. I can't get over it. I can't forgive. I still feel shame. I still have fear. I still can't trust, whatever it may be, right? I think a lot of people could relate to those words. They're triggering words, but I think we can feel them. Astrology can be great in the cognitive part. Well, you know that was then and not now, and you know that you've developed it. But how do you shift the behavioral part, right? Because in the really good therapeutic model called cognitive behavioral therapy, you've got to understand it, and then you have to have enough, whatever, self-mastery, or just desire, a strong enough desire, or just you're in enough pain where you go, fine, nothing else has worked. I'm going to do this hard thing. And we start to make the changes. Now, sometimes the cognitive is enough, but I don't think so. I think people often need some auxiliary therapeutic, and it doesn't have to be psychotherapy. It could be tapping, right? It could be regression work where we go back and we actually can conjure up a situation and change our power in the moment. There's so many ways we could do it. And that's where I think astrology and a lot of other things have really beautiful natural compatibilities, and one, kind of potentiates the other with us and with the animals too. And there's a third thing I wanted to say to answer your question: how can astrology help us with our pets? And the more we understand ourselves and what our needs are, and what our fears are, what our blocks are, we can catch ourselves. We don't want to project this stuff onto our partners or our children or our boss, or whomever, nor do we want to do it onto our pets. If we know that we have like anger issues, if it can flare up out of the blue, we want to know that so that we never, ever, ever take it out on that poor pet. If we have like deep love needs and a pet can fulfill them, we want to not say, I don't ever need a partner because I have you, Fluffy. It's wonderful. And if that's your choice, that's fine. But we don't want to stop too short. We don't want to explore what else is possible for us. So you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a slippery slope there, because love of our animals is such a special, nothing else fills that, not even the love of our partner. But I mean, if you can have a partner and you both love the pets and the pets love the both of you, it's magical. But I think every improvement starts with awareness. And so astrology is a tool for awareness, and so it can only be helpful in all applications.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much, Suzanne. And it's interesting that you bring up cognitive behavioral therapy because that was a huge gift for me, actually. I went through an experience where my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and I had been estranged from him for many years. And I recognized that I was able to mentally process things, kind of compartmentalize actually. And I was working on my PhD at the time, and I just happened to say in a supervisory session when my supervisor was like, "Oh, so what's going on?" I was like, "Oh, well, my dad just got diagnosed with cancer, and I'm kind of behind on my chapter, whatever." And she was like, "Excuse me, can we go back to that first thing?" And she said, like, what's what? But she actually was really great about suggesting I go for therapy. And when I went to see the therapist, they paired me up with somebody who specifically did CBT because she was great. She recognized that I would compartmentalize and not feel it. And what I was being asked to do. So again, even something as terrible as my dad being diagnosed with cancer, seeing it as a gift from that bigger picture, like you're describing, stepping way back from that oil painting, seeing the gift of it and actually learning to process my emotions. Because I don't think I 100% agree with you. The cognitive isn't enough. It's the first part of the puzzle, but we have to learn how to feel it and to be okay with those feelings. And I actually think that's a big part of how our animals play the role of healers and teachers, because oftentimes they give us, because I was told the same thing by the curandero when Lucky showed up in my life. He's dogs are healers and teachers for you. And I had at the time this image of like, oh, this just means it's going to be great and easy. And actually, like, the journey I've been on with him has been anything but easy, but it has been great. It has been great. But a big part of what he's invited me to do is to really step into allowing those feelings. And the feelings to me are connected to the shadow, that oftentimes we don't allow ourselves to feel a certain way because we think there's something wrong with feeling that way. So he's been helping me to integrate a lot of the shadow stuff through feeling, through being okay with it. And I think that's a huge gift that animals in particular can offer us, where we can often feel safer opening up in that kind of a context than we might from somebody else, where we might be feeling like we would be judged, or we've got to put language around it and we don't know how to put language around it. But we don't have to do that with our animals. They just are. They allow us to just be in the same way that they're just being with whatever's coming up. So I actually think that's a huge gift that they provide us. Again, not projecting onto them, but just looking at the kind of dynamics that a relationship with an animal offers us that's different from the kind of dynamics that a human relationship offers us. And there's just such magic in all of that.
Oh, very much so. Can I say something about your chart?
Sure.
Because it's so perfect what you just described, that moment um, of working on your thesis. And you're a Virgo,
Mhm.
and your moon is in the opposite sign. You're born during a full moon. You have a moon in Pisces. Of all the different signs, of all the opposing signs, Virgo and Pisces they share a lot. They share compassion and service and kindness and a love of animals, of course. But Virgo is like the hyper left brain sign. They're the analytical ones. They're the Mr. Spock from Star Trek, but that is not logical, Captain, right? It's just sheer reasoning and analysis. And what is Pisces? Sheer everything opposite. Intuition, sensation, feeling, knowing, emotion. Oh, I know this. I understand this. It's connection. And any opposition in astrology, it's not actually a block. It's a beautiful invitation to find the best of both and integrate them into something new. And so, of course, I'm immediately thinking, questioning, I wonder when that happened. I wonder what transits she was having. Transits being the relationship of the actual moving planets, the angles that they make, to, that just the angles that they make to the planets in our natal chart, they will activate it. They will not cause anything, but they will activate the natal energies so that we can say, is this good? Is this useful? Do I enjoy this? Do I want more of it? Is this problematic? Is this taking me away from my stated goals? Is this causing conflict? And then we really get to look at what we as humans will choose to do as a result of that. But for you, I mean, it makes sense that there'd be a pivotal point at which you learn to, you don't leave the Virgo. You don't say, I'm not going to be reasonable anymore. I'm only going to intuit things. Nor do we say, right. Or nor do we say intuition is a game. It's imprecise. We can't count on it. I'm sticking to logic. It's really about what? It's about becoming, I guess you could kind of say, psychically ambidextrous.
Very much so. And I feel like that has been my journey actually since that point. That was a very pivotal point for a number of reasons. But yeah, allowing me to sort of synthesize those two, which previously I had felt it was always an either or kind of
Yeah.
thing. It was a battle of, like, some people might say, like, battle of the head and the gut kind of thing. It was constantly that. And I never knew which one to listen to. And I think since that moment where that was a huge shift in my life, that I learned to synthesize, like you're saying, and bring the two together so that it wasn't integrating of the shadow that I had created of keeping the two separate, and
Yeah.
actually bringing them together to work together, because it is the healing axis too. And it's referred to as the healing axis, but understanding that what needed to be healed was me. It's
Yeah.
not just like going out and trying to be a healer. Sure, those are things that I have taken on. But again, as I've talked about before with things like Reiki, the way that those sorts of energy modalities work, it's not the healer healing you. It's not the medication you're taking that's healing the body. Those things are helping to create the appropriate context for you to heal yourself. We always are self-healing. And I think that particular moment in time and what cascaded from that really facilitated a deeper level of self-healing that hadn't been necessarily as aware of that I needed to do. And since doing that, it has allowed me to merge those two sides in a much more effective and comfortable and holistic kind of way, for
Yeah.
sure.
It's really about the right tool for the job,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Because there's sometimes we really have to like sit down and crunch numbers. Can I
Yeah.
afford this? You know, but should I do that? Well, that's not going to be logic. That's going to be emotion driven. I think of the image that just popped into my head when you were describing it is watching tennis, but doubles. When you've got two players, right? Playing two different players. And when the ball comes in between the two, who gets that ball? You don't want both players, especially if one's a righty and one's a lefty. You don't want that happening, because what's going to happen? You won't be effective. They'll cancel each other out, in a manner of speaking.
Mhm.
You want that. And with time, with experience, it becomes second nature. You don't have to think, should I let Virgo handle this, or do you want it, Pisces? It's really, it's not that. I mean, at first it might start to feel that way. Head, you said gut, I would think heart.
Mhm.
The gut and the heart are connected. The gut and the
Mhm.
brain are connected, but different. It's a different kind of brain.
Definitely.
But it's really about letting it become second nature so that we just sense which is going to be better equipped to handle whatever that situation is.
Yeah. So if people were looking at their charts, if they're sort of new to this and they pull up their chart, what would be some kind of easy starting points for them to kind of look at it and start to understand what they could make use of kind of right away as a beginner? Because I know it's a science that you could go so deep in, but as a beginner, where should somebody start?
Now, this is going to sound very self-interested, but this is my honest reaction to that. Somebody wants to work out in a fancy gym or start doing something very specific like complicated yoga system, a Iyengar where it's very much about proper alignment, or Pilates. I don't think the best thing to do is to try to guess your way through it. I really believe. I know what we spend on handbags and highlights and of course what we spend on our pets, right? Which we would never think twice about. That's our schizophrenic value system. But I think the best place to start is to have a reading and to say to the astrologer, I want to be able to work with my chart on my own. When we have our session, will you show me things about myself that I can read more about, that I can track the transits of, right? Like a good trainer will say, here's what you want to remember. When you go to the gym, do this, don't do this, right? Think about that, learn about this, feel it in your body. And I think a good astrologer who's not just focused on income, who's really truly here to facilitate other people's growth, will have no problem with that, giving suggestions. I give people homework all the time. They're like, wait, I just came for a reading. You're giving me homework? Like, yeah, you want to go deeper with this, right? And to answer your question without that as a possible answer, we call it the big three: the sun, the moon, the rising sign. The sun and the moon you can get. The sun, for sure. Well, unless you're born on a cusp day and you literally don't know what time you're born. But that's only going to be 1 in 30 people, statistically. The moon's going to change signs every 2.5 days. So if you don't have a clue about your time, I can't quite do that math quickly, but 40% of you are going to less than that every 2.5 days. A certain percentage of people are not going to be able to find their moon sign, let alone house. And then if you don't know your time, you don't even know what your rising sign is. So the first place to start is to get your time. I say this to people, this is absolutely a worthy pursuit. Look for birth records, look high and low. If there's nothing in the house or you happen to have a birth certificate that doesn't have the time, which is common, not just in the US, in a number of places. And for a lot of people in other cultures and of other generations, they're home births. Mom wasn't recording this, right? She was just trying not to bleed out. So the birth time was a bit of a luxury. So then we might want to go, if it wasn't a home birth, we might want to go to our county or whatever our jurisdiction is where in the country where we're born. Do they have it? These things are often on file. In the US, perhaps in other countries, I'm not sure, we have a short birth certificate form and a long one. And the long one often, and not always, will have the time, whereas the short one may not. And another thing to do is a little more anecdotal, but it's better than nothing. Ask older relatives, ask neighbors, ask an older sibling that would classify as an older relative, but what do you remember? And people will start telling you stories. Oh, your mom woke up in the middle of the night. We went to the hospital, and you came out. We barely made it to the hospital. Or, it. I was doing this, and I got a call that she, whatever. They're often family lore stories around the birth. Try to get them. And then when all else fails, there is a system that we use. There are a few systems. We'll ask a lot of questions. We'll try to make certain things fall or line up in certain ways that are way too technical to go into, but trust me, they can work. Also working with a pendulum in that, kinesiology way,
Hmm.
where you already know how to work with your pendulum. Yes, no. And you just start to narrow the field. So those are the best ways to work with it. And the big three, just read about it, Google it. Google, I have a sun in Virgo and a moon in Pisces. And the first things that come up may not be the best things. They'll be the most popular things. They'll be, maybe, popular women's magazines that have massive SEO, I mean, um, search engine optimization practices. So they get to the top, even if it's a little pop. But start reading, start digging. What what does everybody say? What's kind of that commonality that you can probably trust? And then you go deeper on your own.
Mm. Oh, that's really helpful. Suzanne, if somebody wanted to work with you to do their chart, how would they go about doing that? Where could they contact you for that?
Well, there's a few ways, and I think you're putting some of these contact informations on the show notes.
Yeah.
They can just go to my website, which is Stars and Stones Healing. The stars is obvious. I also work with sacred stones in my shamanic work. Um, they can, if they're really not sure, they've got a lot of questions. I understand that. Sometimes I want to work with somebody in a different field, and I want to get a better sense of them before. Yeah, we don't want to invest money in something that might not be helpful, but even more importantly, we don't want to invest the hope, right? And so I invite everybody to book a short complimentary call with me. No cost, no obligation. My name is Suzanne. You go to asksuzanne.com. That will take you to a booking calendar, and you can book this reading with me and share whatever your questions or concerns are. Always happy to do that with sincere seekers. And another thing is I'm offering everybody a little recording that I did. You and I have talked about gratitude in the past and how it's kind of a bridge between where we are and where we might want to be,
Yeah.
right? It's another way to reset our energetic level, right? The level of our vibration, also the amplitude of it. Gratitude will put us into a state of receivership. It will literally alter our brain wave functioning. It's not a one-off. Don't just say thank you, when one thing happens. It's a daily practice. And some people go, I'm in such a bad state. I've got nothing to be grateful for. Boy, you need it more than ever then. Because whatever your circumstances are, and with all due respect to people who are truly suffering, you probably have some of your senses. You could probably hear music. You could probably see beauty. You can probably cuddle with your pet. You probably can eat some delicious food. Something good probably happened to you once. And the more we get into the energy of those things and not my pain, the more we can shift out of it. And so I just have a little recording that I've done about gratitude. It includes a very brief micro practice, closed eye practice, just warning people if they have a little anxiety around closing their eyes, you do it in your own home. Do
Mhm.
it when you feel safe. And you're going to have that link. It's hosted on my website. You don't have to go to social media, and that'll be in the show notes. They can sign up for that. When they sign up for that, they'll start receiving my newsletter, which is usually Astro News. And it's a way to keep in touch with me and to see exactly how they can book a reading.
Oh, perfect. That's so helpful. And I love that you're just so generous with a 15-minute call as well if somebody wants to kind of learn a little bit more and check in with you. And I agree with you. I think too when we're doing these kinds of practices that you want to be in resonance with the person who is doing your chart, for example, right? Like it's an energy exchange. You want to feel good about all of this. And I think it reminds me too of when I used to, I read tarot, but I have often gone to tarot readers in the past and I've had some fantastic experiences and I've had some really terrible experiences. And I know that the terrible ones can be really marking. where you take that on and then you're like, oh my God, and you're living your life from that other person's perspective, right? It's like from the thing that they told you. So I'm a big advocate for find the person that feels good for you. Find the person that you feel in resonance with, because it's important that you have that kind of connection so that you get out of the experience what you need to get out of it above and beyond anything else. So that's wonderful. Thank you for offering that for people. And thank you for the gratitude practice. Big
It's a good
advocate for
one.
that. Big
You
advocate for
know,
that.
one of the things I say is it's not the astrology. Most of us learn the same rules and principles and how to work with planets. It's the astrologer. It's that person's worldview.
Yeah.
Are they doom and gloom? Do they feel like everything is fated? Did they have a very unhappy life where they're projecting their negativity onto other people? Have they not have a lot of life experiences? I work with
Hmm.
some very precocious young people, but until you've gone through certain stages of your life, it's kind of guesswork
Yeah.
what these generational transits might bring, or unless you've experienced a lot yourself, especially around pain, other people's trauma, how to talk to other people about this without triggering them. This takes a certain agility. It also takes a certain, it's not knowledge, it's wisdom, and it's about compassion. I was so blessed. I am so blessed to have had such extraordinary teachers, astrological, spiritual, shamanic, Buddhist, more. I like to think that I carry their medicine, their approach, which is I don't work with people who aren't heart-based. It can't come from a place of anything that isn't authentic and isn't in full integrity, but also positive. It doesn't mean that I would tell people, don't worry about that Pluto thing. That won't hurt. It's about preparing people. Look, this is happening, this energetic thing. How do you want to work with that energy? But you can't act like something that's going to be really deeply transformational is going to just be another Tuesday.
Exactly. Exactly. I find the same thing too when I'm doing tarot readings and you pull like the death card or the devil card or the tower. Those are like the big three that people see and go, oh no. And for me, I think so much about the tarot and any of these tools, because again, tarot, just like astrology, is reflecting back to us. It's giving us the opportunity to say, and what do I want to do with this? And I agree with you. You prepare people for it, but you also say the important, for me anyways, with the tarot, the importance comes from what is the meaning that you are assigning to that experience, right? The experience doesn't have inherent meaning. It's neutral in and of itself. What's important is what are you assigning to that? So if you can see the thing that is a difficult experience to go through, like even with me talking about like the experience of having my dad diagnosed with cancer and then the fact that we didn't have a good relationship. So all of the garbage that I was carrying around that, the thing itself was neutral. What I had to explore is, and what is the meaning I'm assigning to all aspects of that, including the fact that we'd been estranged and I was putting stuff on me and all that kind of stuff. The therapy that I did was actually working through shifting the meaning for myself. And so I think that's where, when we talked about in the very beginning, like free will and fate and stuff, that's part of our choice. We get to choose what we make this mean for us. And that's when you know that, that is so empowering. And to walk through your life with, in a sense, it doesn't really matter. I'm not diminishing experiences, but meaning that what is far more important than the actual experiences, in my opinion, is the meaning we are making them, the thing that we're assigning to them and what we're thinking that means about us, because we get to control that. And that's hugely empowering.
Yeah, and I would
Yeah,
add one thing to that from an
please.
evolutionary astrological perspective, which is really probably the main path I follow. It's looking at the soul's life, the soul's journey, the soul's evolution. Is we would look at a situation and not say, why is this happening to me? But to say, what is the evolutionary intention? What's the potential here? Why might this be happening to me for my soul's learning?
Is so empowering. So empowering. Oh, I love that so much. Thank you for adding that in. I think that's really helpful to hear. And we might not necessarily be able to do it right in the moment when the thing is happening, but like hopefully we get to the point where shortly thereafter we can step back. Like I just love that analogy that you've given with the oil painting, that we can step back a little bit further and actually see it a little bit differently and not feel so triggered in the moment by it, to actually see that there's a great gift in everything that happens to us, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we have to unhook from the drama around it
Mhm.
because we feed on that. We humans feed on the drama. Even when we say, no, we don't, I hate drama. Um, this would be my challenge. Is that true? Do you really hate drama?
Right. Why is there so much reality TV? Because we love it, right? We love the drama.
Well, there's drama in, fiction too,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
there's drama everywhere, but we are addicted to it, right? These strong emotions. Like people say, I don't want to be a Buddhist because I love my feelings. It's not about not having feelings. It's about the attachment to the feelings. And then what happens as a result? The grasping, I need to hang on to this, or I need to push this away. There's no allowing. There's no equilibrium in that. It's always one or the other. And that's part of the drama.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's part of what we're here to experience, and to see, like, I think again, another choice point is, can we let go of it? We've had the experience of it. Has that served us? Can we also choose to let go of it?
Can you
Yeah,
love without attachment?
right, right. It's a big lesson.
Oh, it's the biggest.
Oh my God. Suzanne, I could talk to you for absolute hours. This is just amazing. We'll have to have you come back and talk more about this, because I think it's so relevant to what we're going through individually and collectively. And it's so helpful to have these other touch points and these other tools for helping us to better understand ourselves in order to make better choices for ourselves, in order to make more empowered and informed from, like you were saying, from the higher self, from the soul's perspective versus just what the limitations that the ego knows about. So I feel like we got to come back and talk more. So-
It would be great. And also, we could talk about we've got a lot of really major astrological shifts happening, like now,
right.
even before people are going to have access to this conversation. But shortly thereafter, and continuing, all of 2025 is really marked by, it's kind of a holy crap kind of
Right.
year for everybody, whether they're having personal direct hits, so to speak, or not. This is There are collective shifts that are happening. There really are. And to leave things on a really positive note, we really are evolving into a new kind of humanity. And it is what you were saying. Yeah, there's always violence, there's always going to be oppression. I mean, you cannot point to one time in human history where this wasn't really the earmark of that. What's different is people coming together with this love, with this intentionality to improve everyone's lot, not just their own. And this, to me, is one of the greatest gifts of the internet, is this interconnection that it isn't giving us. That it's giving us that we haven't
Mhm.
had in the past. I just sort of, my brain went off on a squirrel tangent about COVID, and how
Mhm.
there's an understanding in certain circles that a lot of us who who are experiencing COVID, who are alive on the planet at that time, especially people going through some dire stuff. A lot of people, their lives were actually upgraded, but a lot of people know there was a lot of pain and loss and suffering, and we can't deny that. A lot of people feel that these souls had lived through other pandemics, specifically during times where there was no electricity, where there was no communicate, modern communication. If you couldn't shout to them, they couldn't hear you. And to see that we really are, that there's a connection,
Mhm.
and that human connection is part of our lifeline.
Mm.
And so it was almost like an after, like a belated healing
Mm.
that they got in discovering this. That was just the tangent I went on. But yeah, everything is happening for a reason. We are evolving. the way we're coming together, it's not meaningless. A lot of people go, I don't want to vote. I don't like either of them. I don't want to do this. What difference does it make? Why should I recycle? Look at my neighbor. Look at that country. They're not doing that. Every action matters. Every thought matters. So yeah, we're all in this together.
I love it so much. Thank you for that. Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you back on and talk about 2025. I think that'll be really interesting and useful for people too. Before I let you go, I have one final question that I ask all of my guests, and we've touched on aspects of this, but I'd just love to give you the opportunity to reflect on this, which is, what do you feel? Normally I ask, what do you feel your dog, but in your case, your cats or animals in general that you've connected with, help you to understand? What have they taught you about what it means to be human?
Oh, I have the most extraordinary cats. They're energy masters. And I think what they've taught me is that you can be soft and sweet, and you don't have to push, you don't have to be noisy, you don't have to be demanding, that we can, and we don't have to have words to do it, that we can really use what we sense to honor other people's boundaries and to give and receive love.
That's perfect. I love it so much. Thank you so very much. I know this is going to be so interesting to people and so helpful. You've just been an absolute gift with your wisdom, your generosity of spirit and energy. I'm really grateful. Thank you, Suzanne.
Well, I feel the same way toward you, so thank you so much, and thanks to everybody for listening. If they've made it this far, you guys have you've got some endurance there.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me for my conversation today with Suzanne Gerber. I hope you come away from this chat feeling empowered and inspired. To learn more about Suzanne and how to work with her, visit her website, starsandstoneshealing.com. I've left this link in the show notes, as well as the links to book a complimentary call with Suzanne and download her lovely guided gratitude practice that she is gifting to listeners. And just a reminder, if you'd like me to cover any particular topics related to nourishing your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul on future episodes, please reach out and let me know. You can DM me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama or reach out to me on my website, mysticdogmama.com. All right, until next time.